Did you know that after the Civil War ended in 1865, several black Mississippians were elected to public office? This took place during a period known as Reconstruction. See, it was a time when freed slaves were granted rights as citizens under the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments of the U.S. Constitution. Of those rights were the right to vote, hold office, gain citizenship, and ultimately the end of slavery. They were elected to local and state positions across the South. One person, Hiram Revels, was elected to the United States Senate and represented the state of Mississippi. Blanche K. Bruce was later elected to the Senate, also representing Mississippi. Now, just as the New South was taking shape, which included former slaves as citizens, some whites resented the idea that former slaves would now be considered their equal. They were against change. This change of the South was a threat to their way of life. Some people formed organizations to terrorize blacks. Some blacks were even murdered. This period of terror across the South was even more terrifying in Mississippi. Before long, blacks who were elected were forced out of office and many more were denied the right to vote. Not being able to vote also prevented blacks from serving on juries. Black codes, or segregation laws, were imposed on local cities, counties, and states. These laws were designed to keep blacks in their place as the permanent underclass of American society. Most of these laws were only upheld in southern states. By 1961, almost 100 years after Reconstruction, the right to vote would become the focus of many in Mississippi and throughout the South. In many rural areas in Mississippi, the black population outnumbered whites, but very few blacks had the right to vote. None held political office. Unfair practices like poll taxes, literacy tests, intimidation, and violence prompted a response from ordinary Americans who were outraged by the unfair treatment of blacks in Mississippi. Constitutional inequities between whites and blacks, socioeconomic inequalities, and violent oppression in southern states like Mississippi led to the concept of Freedom Summer, a movement that mobilized mostly young white college students from northern states to take part in voter registration drives in freedom schools across the state. The year was 1964. President Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, Texas a year prior. The current president was Lyndon B. Johnson. Freedom School in 1964 was conceived by Robert Moses, who at the time served as a student activist. Through his efforts, young whites and blacks were unified for a common goal: help poor black Mississippians overcome daily hardships and register as many as possible to vote. Students prepared for this service by reading and studying, role-playing to get ready for conflict, which was bound to happen. 3 civil rights workers were reported missing in Mississippi. They were Michael Schwerner, Andrew Goodman, and James Chaney. Later, they would be found murdered. Despite this news and threats to their lives, volunteers sacrificed to help their fellow Americans achieve the same liberties and rights as their white counterparts. Although voting rights were the most important goal of Freedom Summer, freedom schools were created to teach basic subjects, Black history, and the government. Voter registrations did increase as a result of Freedom Summer, but not enough to make a real difference. Out of the approximate 17,000 Black Mississippians who tried to register in the summer of '64, a little over 1,000 successfully registered. It would take the Voting Rights Act of 1965 to set the motion for real change. Even then, more work would be required. Thank you.